Paris. The year is 1720. The air in the narrow streets smells of horse manure, unwashed bodies, and something else, something new. It smells of hysteria. If you stood on the Rue Quincampoix that summer, you would have seen a spectacle that defied all logic. Dukes and dustmen, countesses and carriage drivers, all shouting, shoving, and waving frantic hands. They weren't fighting over food. They were fighting for paper. Specifically, shares in the Mississippi Company. A man named John Law, a Scottish gambler turned economist, had convinced the French regent that paper money was the future. That gold was a relic. He flooded Paris with new currency, and for a brief, shining moment, everyone felt rich. The price of land skyrocketed. The price of bread followed. Servants were buying castles. It was a party that seemed like it would never end. But watching from the shadows was another man, an Irish banker named Richard Cantillon. He didn't scream. He didn't buy the hype. He watched. And he noticed something that would become the most dangerous secret in the history of economics. He noticed that the money didn't spread evenly. He saw that the people close to John Law, the bankers, the politicians, the insiders, they were buying real assets. They were buying land and gold while the prices were still low. By the time the new money reached the hands of the working class, the prices of everything had already doubled. The insiders got rich because the outsiders got poor. It wasn't a rising tide lifting all boats. It was a transfer of wealth. Richard Cantillon made a fortune betting against that bubble. But he left us something more valuable than his gold. He left us a warning. A principle that explains why, 300 years later, you are working harder but falling further behind. It is called the Cantillon effect, and if you do not understand it, you are the victim of it. Today, we are going to deconstruct the mechanism that silently steals your time and energy. We are going to look at why inflation is not a natural disaster, but a policy choice. We will travel from the collapse of Rome to the wheelbarrows of Weimar, and finally, to the digital printing presses of the Federal Reserve. This is the story of how money enters the world, and why it matters whose hands it touches first. The common misconception about inflation is that it works like water in a bathtub. The theory goes that if the central bank prints $2 trillion and drops it into the economy, the water level rises equally for everyone. Prices go up, wages go up, and nothing really changes. Economists call this the neutrality of money. It is a beautiful theory. It is also a lie. Richard Cantillon argued that money is not like water. It is like honey. Imagine pouring a jar of thick, viscous honey into the center of a saucer. It does not spread out instantly to the edges. No, it piles up in the middle first. The people in the middle, where the honey is poured, get access to it before anyone else. They can scoop it up and use it while it is still concentrated. By the time the honey oozes out to the edge of the saucer, it is thin, it is messy, and the people at the edge are left with the sticky residue. In our modern financial system, who stands in the middle of the saucer? Who stands directly under the pour? It is the government. It is the commercial banks. It is the large corporations with direct access to credit markets. When the Federal Reserve creates money, they do not mail an envelope of cash to your doorstep. They do not deposit it into the savings account of a teacher in Ohio or a carpenter in Leeds. They buy bonds. They lend to major banks. So let us play this out. The Federal Reserve clicks a button. Billions of dollars are created out of thin air. This new money flows instantly into the accounts of Wall Street banks. Now, pause. Think about this moment. The bank has the money. But the rest of the economy does not know this money exists yet. The prices of milk, gasoline, and real estate have not changed. They are still priced at yesterday's reality. So the bank takes this fresh, uninflated money and goes shopping. They buy stocks, they buy corporate bonds, they buy mortgage-backed securities. They are buying assets with currency that has not yet lost its purchasing power. They are stealing value from the future. As this money floods into the financial markets, what happens? The stock market goes up. The bond market rallies. The CEOs and executives who are paid in stock options see their net worth explode. They feel wealthy. So they go out and buy penthouses in Manhattan, luxury cars, and fine art. The honey is starting to spread. Now the luxury car dealer has the money. The real estate developer has the money. They feel richer, so they expand their businesses. They buy more steel, more concrete, more microchips. Now the commodity prices start to rise. The money is moving further from the center. Finally, after months or even years, this wave of money reaches you. It reaches the grocery store. It reaches the gas station. But by the time it gets to your paycheck, the game is over. The prices of housing, food, and energy have already adjusted to the new supply of money. You get the new dollars, but they are worth less than they were when the banks got them. This is the Cantillon effect. It is the reason why, during the massive money printing of 2020, the stock market reached all-time highs, while millions of people lost their jobs. It is not a paradox. It is the mechanics of the system working exactly as designed. To understand how catastrophic this can be, we have to look back. We have to understand that this is not a new invention. This is a recurring pattern in the history of human civilization. And every time it happens, it ends the same way. Let us go to Rome. The denarius was the silver coin that fueled the Roman Empire. In the time of Augustus, it was almost pure silver, 95% pure. It was sound money. You could trust it. A soldier knew that his salary was worth a specific weight of precious metal. But empires are expensive. You have borders to defend. You have legions to feed. You have a populace that demands bread and circuses. And politicians, whether they wear togas or suits, hate raising taxes. Taxes make people angry. Taxes cause riots. So the Roman emperors found a cheat code. They started clipping the coins. They would call in the currency, melt it down, mix in some cheap copper or bronze, and mint more coins with the same face value. Nero reduced the silver content to 90%. Then Trajan took it down to 85%. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, took it to 75%. By the time we get to the 3rd century, the denarius was a fraud. It had only 5% silver. It was a copper coin dipped in a silver wash that would rub off after a few transactions. Now, apply the Cantillon effect here. Who got the new, debased coins first? The emperor and the army. The emperor could pay his debts and his soldiers with this new, low-quality money at full face value. The merchants, the farmers, and the citizens didn't realize at first that the coins were lighter, that the metal was impure. They accepted them as usual. But slowly, the market realized the truth. It took more denarii to buy a bushel of wheat. It took more to buy a tunic. The soldiers demanded higher pay because their money bought less. So the emperor had to debase the currency even more to pay them. It became a death spiral. The rich, those close to the emperor, dumped their currency for land and gold. The poor were left holding bags of worthless copper. The middle class of Rome was wiped out. And when the middle class dies, the society dies. The trust that held the empire together evaporated. Rome didn't fall because of barbarians at the gates. It fell because the money rotted from the inside. This is the lesson of history that modern economists try to ignore. They will tell you that a little bit of inflation is good. They call it a target, 2%. They say it encourages spending. But ask yourself, who benefits from that spending? Let us move forward in time. Let us look at the most terrifying example of the Cantillon effect in the 20th century, the Weimar Republic. Germany, 1923. We have all seen the photos. Children playing with stacks of cash as if they were building blocks. A woman burning banknotes in her stove because it was cheaper than buying wood. But how did it start? It didn't start with hyperinflation. It started with a debt that couldn't be paid. Germany had lost the First World War. They were crushed under the reparations demanded by the Treaty of Versailles. They owed 132 billion gold marks. They didn't have the gold. Their industry was shattered. So the government did the only thing it could do. They turned on the printing press. At first, it seemed to work. The money flowed into the heavy industries, coal and steel. The industrialists, the tycoons of Germany, were the Cantillon insiders. They borrowed massive amounts of this new paper money to buy factories, mines, and real assets. Why? Because they knew the inflation was coming. They knew that by the time they had to pay back the loans, the money would be worthless. Think about the brilliance and the cruelty of that strategy. If I borrow 1 million marks to buy a factory, and next year a loaf of bread costs 1 million marks, I have effectively got the factory for free. The working class of Germany did not have access to these loans. They had wages, fixed wages. As the government printed more, the mark collapsed. Prices didn't just rise, they doubled every few days. Workers would rush to the factory gates at lunchtime to get paid, then run to the shops to buy anything, a sausage, a pair of shoes, a bag of coal, because by dinner time, the money would be worth half as much. The middle class, the people who had saved, who had been responsible, who had put money in government bonds, were obliterated. Their life savings could not buy a cup of coffee. Meanwhile, the industrialists, the alpha receivers of the new money, ended up owning everything. Hugo Stinnes, the German industrialist, became the king of inflation. He owned a sizable chunk of the German economy because he understood the Cantillon effect. He borrowed paper to buy hard assets. This destroyed the soul of Germany. It radicalized the population. When people realize the game is rigged, when they see that hard work does not pay, but proximity to the printer does, they look for someone to blame. The chaos of the Weimar inflation paved the road directly to the rise of extremism and the Second World War. Money is not just a medium of exchange. It is a social contract. It is a promise that your labor today will store value for tomorrow. When that contract is broken, civilization unravels. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that was Rome, that was Weimar. We are smarter now. We have the Federal Reserve. We have sophisticated algorithms and PhD economists. Do we? Let us look at 2008, the global financial crisis. The housing bubble burst. Banks had gambled on toxic assets and lost. By all the rules of capitalism, they should have failed, but they were too big to fail. They were too close to the honeypot. The Federal Reserve invented a new term, quantitative easing. It sounds technical, almost scientific. It is simply a euphemism for printing money to buy bad debts from rich people. The Fed created trillions of dollars. Did they give it to the homeowners who were being foreclosed on? Did they give it to the small businesses that were crushing under the recession? No. They gave it to the banks. They bought the toxic mortgage bonds off the banks' balance sheets at face value. The Cantillon effect kicked in with brutal efficiency. The banks, now flush with fresh cash, did not lend to Main Street. They speculated. They bought back their own stock. The stock market began a bull run that lasted over a decade. Asset prices soared. If you owned stocks, if you owned prime real estate, you became incredibly wealthy. But what about the wages? The wages of the average American worker remained flat. In real terms, adjusted for the actual cost of living, housing, education, healthcare, wages went down. This created the massive wealth gap we see today. It wasn't caused by capitalism in the free market sense. It was caused by a monetary intervention that privileged the holders of assets over the holders of labor. Then came 2020, the pandemic. If 2008 was a stream of honey, 2020 was a tsunami. In the span of 2 years, the Federal Reserve printed nearly 40% of all U.S. dollars that had ever existed in history. 40%. Where did it go? We saw the K-shaped recovery. That is the economist's polite way of describing the Cantillon effect. The top arm of the K goes up. That's the tech giants, the shareholders, the crypto whales, the luxury real estate owners. The bottom arm of the K goes down. That's the service workers, the renters, the people living paycheck to paycheck. We saw housing prices spike 20, 30, 40% in a single year. Did houses become 40% better? Did the utility of a 3-bedroom ranch in Austin, Texas increase by 40%? No. The value of the house didn't change. The value of the money collapsed. Institutional investors like BlackRock used access to cheap credit, rates near zero, to buy up entire neighborhoods. They were the first receivers of the money. You, trying to buy a home with a mortgage at 7%, are the last receiver. You are competing against money that costs them nothing, with money that costs you your life's energy. This is the hidden tax. Inflation is a tax that no one votes for. If the government came out and said, "We are going to tax 50% of your savings to pay for our mistakes," there would be a revolution. There would be pitchforks in the streets. So instead, they print the money. They dilute your savings. They steal the purchasing power right out of your pocket, and you don't even see their hand doing it. You blame the grocery store. You blame the gas company. You blame the supply chain. But the math is simple. If you double the amount of money, but you don't double the amount of goods and services, the price of everything must eventually double. However, because of the Cantillon effect, the timing of that doubling is what matters. The rich get the double money before the double prices. The poor get the double prices before, or without ever getting, the double money. So, what does this mean for you? Why does this historian bother dusting off old stories about French bankers and Roman emperors? Because the pattern is repeating. We are at the end of a long-term debt cycle. The sovereign debt of the United States, of Europe, of Japan is at levels that can never be paid back in real terms. There are only 2 ways a government can deal with unpayable debt. 1. Default. Tell the creditors they aren't getting paid. This is honest, but it is political suicide. It causes an immediate depression. 2. Inflate. Print the money to pay the debt. Pay the bondholders back in nominal terms, but with currency that is worth a fraction of what it used to be. Every fiat currency in history has eventually returned to its intrinsic value, zero. The denarius, the assignat, the Reichsmark, the Continental. The average lifespan of a fiat currency is about 27 years. The US dollar has lasted since 1971 without a gold backing. We are on borrowed time. The system requires constant expansion of the money supply just to keep from collapsing. And that expansion means the Cantillon effect will continue to widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. If you keep your wealth in fiat currency, in savings accounts, in bonds, in cash under the mattress, you are the victim. You are standing at the edge of the saucer, waiting for the honey that will never reach you. You need to move. You need to position yourself closer to the source or outside the system entirely. This is why the wealthy love hard assets. Gold. It cannot be printed by a central bank. It requires energy and work to extract from the earth. Nero could not debase gold. He could only debase the coin. The gold itself retained its value. Real estate. They are not making any more land. As the money supply expands, the price of land absorbs that new liquidity. It acts as a shield. And now, in the digital age, we have something Richard Cantillon could never have imagined. Bitcoin. Absolute scarcity. 21 million units, no more. No one can print more to pay for a war. No one can print more to bail out a bank. It is the only asset in the universe with a supply cap that is mathematically enforced, not politically promised. When you buy Bitcoin or gold or a rental property, you are essentially opting out of the Cantillon game. You are converting your labor, which is finite, into an asset that cannot be diluted by a bureaucrat with a keyboard. The Cantillon effect is a mechanism of theft. It is the engine of inequality. But it is also a law of economics. It is like gravity. You can't vote to repeal gravity. You can't protest against it. But you can learn how to build an airplane. You can learn how it works so that you are not crushed by it. The history of money is a history of the struggle between those who create value and those who control the currency. The creators, the farmers, the builders, the engineers, the writers, they generate the real wealth. The controllers, the kings, the emperors, the central bankers, they try to siphon that wealth through debasement. For thousands of years, the controllers have won. They have the armies, they have the laws, they have the mint. But information is the great equalizer. Richard Cantillon wrote his manuscript in the 1730s, and it was passed around in secret before it was published. It was dangerous knowledge. Today, this knowledge is free. It is right here. You now understand why the price of your house is running away from you. You understand why the stock market makes no sense. You understand that the game is rigged. But more importantly, you know how it is rigged. Don't be the person at the edge of the saucer. Don't let your life's work be stolen by the silent tax. Study history, understand the nature of money, and take your wealth into your own hands. The printing press is running hot. The honey is flowing. The question is, where are you standing?